Hi everyone, my name's Calista. I'm an alcoholic. Wow, Jay, thank you for asking me to speak. Um, I'm grateful to show up for my recovery today, and yeah, it's very sweet to be speaking at this meeting. I've been here before as an attendee, and I love it. There's great recovery here. So, just some quick stats. I got sober at 23. I now have 9 years and some change sober. This is my first sobriety. I've worked the steps, I sponsor women, I've worked the traditions. I go to meetings, I have commitments, all the things they suggest of us. I do to the best of my ability. I am in no way perfect, but I like to say that because when I first came to the program, I I wanted everyone to like me, but I didn't want to get close to anyone. And so I didn't really work the program like it was suggested. Um, Thankfully, I stayed when things got really painful, but I try my best to stay in the center of the herd because I know what it's like to be on those outskirts of the herd, and it's pretty miserable, at least in my experience. Um, for those of you who are new, or even returning, I like to say welcome home. And the reason I say that is because when I was newly sober, I had never been to a meeting, but I started going to meetings. I was in a sober living. And I remember this woman, from the podium in like a church basement or something, just said, "Everyone, welcome home to Alcoholics Anonymous." And I remember my little judgmental, you know, early adult self was like, "Ma'am, this is not a home. We're in a basement." I just thought I knew everything. And the truth is that she was absolutely right. And the truth is that I never truly knew what home felt like until I got sober and I stuck around. And I built a loving community here and a family, which I could have never anticipated. So welcome home. And if you roll your eyes, that's okay. Um, so, I I grew up in a pretty chaotic household. Um, and I use the chaos I grew up in to excuse my behavior and my drinking and using. I'm not sure if I can talk about outside issues. I'll just say, I'll keep it at that. Um, my house was falling apart. It was really embarrassing. I lived in a moderately affluent community, and I was ashamed of my home. My mom really suffered from alcoholism. I didn't use that terminology at the time. I described her as the reason my life was miserable and all the things she wasn't as a mother, and I was really good at pointing the finger at her, even ironically, while I was struggling with my alcoholism myself. But of course, for anyone who identifies with that, like being in an alcoholic home can be really chaotic, it can be inconsistent. And I had a lot of secrets. And one of those secrets included one that I took into my recovery and I kept off my fourth step, which I do not recommend. But it was the belief that I was a victim of incest. And now I can say on a group level that I'm a survivor of incest. And I share that not because I think it caused my alcoholism, but because I need to be honest in order to stay sober. That's what I learned. We are only as sick as our secrets, and that was me. Um, and it wasn't until other people shared their pain and secrets, whatever they were, even if I didn't relate to them. Um, Once they started sharing on a group level, it communicated to me that I was safe. And so if you relate, no, you're not alone. And yeah, so that was my life. And I was the ultimate victim, right? I had a deck of cards and it was the worst, and poor me, right? And I guess, I had valid reasons as to why I felt that way, but I really took it and ran with it. And I was just so certain that if I had my friend Amy's life down the street with her, perfect family and family dinners every day at 6 p.m., that my life would be perfect. I just I compared myself to everybody and used that comparison and those differences to describe why I felt so awful inside. Um, before I'd ever had a drink or or an outside issue, oh my God, I was miserable. I didn't realize I was miserable, but I was miserable. And so, before I got to an age where those things were accessible to me, my first form of escapism was fantasy. And what this looked like was me preferring to stay home and not hang out with friends, but stay home in my room and isolate and listen to music videos and pretend that I was a superstar. That's what it looked like. If anyone knows Avril Lavigne and Christina Aguilera, that was me. And man, did that really just help me escape from everything. And it worked until it didn't work. And I remember like that summer, like I had just ignored my friends' phone calls, like, no, I'm busy, sorry. I'm too busy pretending I'm a superstar in my room. But finally, near the end of that summer, I picked up the phone. And I went to hang out with my friends, and that was the friend group where I first started getting in touch with alcohol and outside issues. And I could not have comprehended what alcohol would do for me. You know, it became my solution to life, and I think it really did help me make it through many years. And so I'm grateful for that. And I'm also grateful to it because it helped me come into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and all the outside issues as well. But I remember, and it's a common story we hear here is how, we had that first drink and like my shoulders dropped. And that was my experience. Like the first time I got drunk, I just knew like that was what I was going to do for the rest of my life. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be a doctor. I was like, I'm going to keep this and use it, and it will help me get through life. And, I drank to black out, to reach oblivion. I didn't want my brain to be on. I didn't want to be present. And that allowed me the ability to do that. But it also had a lot of harmful consequences for myself and everyone around me. I always like to tell this story because it's just so crazy. But, I remember I like woke up next to my boyfriend. I was probably like 17. I was a blackout drinker, as I had said. So I woke up with like a smile and like, oh, we're ready for the day. And he was like, get off me. And like, this was a normal occurrence. And he was really angry and I didn't understand why. But the truth is I was a really angry drunk. It's like all those feelings I had within me came out in like a monstrous way. And I was really cruel to him. And I remember like I ran outside and I sat on the curb and I looked in the gutter and I like truly admitted to myself that I was an alcoholic. And like the sliver of a thought came in, like, I should probably get help. And then that was gone. And I was like, no, like, this is what my life's going to look like. This is my solution. And so, when I came into the rooms, I found a surrender that was full of hope, like in the first step. This, while it still had the same thread of admitting to myself that I had an issue with alcohol, it was a surrender devoid of hope. I was just like, this is my life. Like, I'm going to build my life around this. And that's what I did. And I was also really good at lying to everybody and saying I was fine. I don't know how I graduated from high school, but I did it by skin of my teeth. It was literally the happiest day of my mom's life, I think. Like I had never seen her smile so much, and that was wonderful. But I just coped with the awful years of high school through substances and alcohol and outside issues. And I graduated and I applied to college last minute, and I was like, this is my solution. I'm gonna leave my town where everybody knows me as like a hot mess. I'm going to leave my family life, which is awful, and I'm going to go to college and just ascend, like straight trajectory. And I chose marine biology as a major because it sounded really interesting. I did not look into what that career would look like, but I was very excited. And off I went. And I remember that first week of college, I had found my people. I had found us, and I was like at a party and, drinking. I was starting to feel good. It was a Thursday. And, my mom called, and I just remember looking at the phone and like the marquee, because back then there were marquees on the front of phones, and seeing her name, and I was like, no, I am not answering that phone call. Because like I mentioned earlier, like my mom suffered from alcoholism. We had a really tumultuous relationship. Um, and there were a lot of ways that she didn't show up for me in the way I needed her to. Um, but I made her like the devil. And the way that I could show her how much she hurt me was by withholding my love from her life and my presence. There were like 2 years I didn't talk to her, you know, um and I knew it caused her pain, but I at the time I really didn't care. I thought my self-righteous anger was justified. Um and ironically, like I was suffering from alcoholism too and doing all the things in a different presentation as she was doing. So anyway, she called and I was like, absolutely not, you know, I assume she wants me to be studying right now. So I'm just gonna lie. I'm gonna say my phone's dying, but I'll call you in the morning. And that's what I did. And she sent a really sweet voicemail and I listened to it, and that was that. So the next day I woke up, it was like 3 p.m. I was so hungover, which was very common, as we know. And I had 17 missed phone calls from my dad. And I called him, and point blank, he was just like, Lissa, that's what he called me. Your mom died this morning. And I just remember, like, number one, I could not take like that information. Like my body just reacted in like a panic attack. But I just remember like my whole concept of the world and worldview turned upside down. You know, suddenly like all the things that she wasn't and she did to me were the things that I did to her, right? Like I was a terrible daughter. I should have showed up for her. And you know, I now know that that's grief, right? Whether it's a really functional, loving relationship or some of the hardest relationships with people we care about, like when we lose someone or even things that aren't death related, we begin to trace the relationship. And that's what I was doing. I had all these unrealized hopes and dreams and expectations on what my life was going to look like with her in it. You know, I wasn't in a relationship. I wasn't planning to have kids or be married, but I had assumed she would be there. So all of this just kind of came flooding in. And again, I was good at lying and saying I was fine when I wasn't. And alcohol was my solution. And so that's what I leaned into. You know, I stayed in school to be strong because my mom would have wanted that. And my life slowly started to fall apart. By the end of that first semester, I had good grades, but I was absolutely broken. And when someone offered me an outside issue, it didn't take much for me to just try it. And suddenly, you know, not only was I addicted to alcohol, but also outside issues. And for me, it was just all the same monster. It just looked different. You know, I remember when I tried this, I literally thought like, oh, well, this is actually better because I don't black out and do embarrassing things. So that was my reasoning. And I dropped out of school. My life completely blew up because of my behavior and my choices. And it got really, really bad. I blew up every relationship I had with people who cared about me. You know, I was a liar. I stole. I became homeless. You know, and I just started like crossing these lines that I had had for myself, like it talks about in the book, and just drawing new ones, you know. Oh, well, I'll never be homeless. I was homeless, sleeping in a tent or even on the sidewalk in the rain. And, you know, just continuing to surround myself with people who were doing the same things as me, but definitely like we all didn't have the best intentions for each other. And slowly I lost my soul and my identity and who I knew myself to be, even if it was kind of a train wreck in that regard. And I would have these moments of clarity where I would like look at my circumstances, like I would be under a bridge And I remember the bridge actually. And I just remember like looking at my surroundings and like the people I was hanging out with. And I just remember thinking like, Calista, this was not the life you were supposed to have. This was not your trajectory. You're supposed to go to school and ascend. And I was not ascending. And what I've learned in my sobriety is that I can have a lot of moments of clarity, whether I'm out there or even in recovery. But if I don't take action, they're just fleeting thoughts. So I had a lot of really clear, fleeting thoughts that I didn't take action around. And slowly and slowly, like my soul just started to break. You know, I had what would some say is like a low bottom, which I don't even really understand like what that means. But for me, it was truly like my insides, my emotions, like my spirit was broken. And it just so happened that I got arrested once again, you know, and I was very familiar with the courts, not because I was like some tough girl, just because I didn't like going back to court, so I'd get warrants. And you know, I went back into LA County Jail, and I knew the whole process. And this time, I was looking at some prison time just because of my record of not taking anything seriously and repeating crimes. And I just remember thinking, like, God, like maybe I can use sobriety to get out of this. You know, there was no thought of like, this is the time to change, until one random day and I was looking around at everybody and there were people that I recognized from previous times I was in jail, and I just had this really clear thought or a moment of clarity, and I looked around and I was like, Calista, this is the life you're gonna have no matter what, whether it's behind the walls of prison, sleeping on a sidewalk, trying to date the drug dealer or be the drug dealer, which never went well, only smoking pot, or you know, being in the bar, like all of the things, right? Like there was just no way that I could manage and control my drinking in the way that I wanted to, and I was going to be miserable no matter what. And from that moment of clarity, the idea of trying sobriety came through, and I'm really grateful that that happened and that they had a big book in jail, because that's where my first big book's from. And you know, I read the beginning and I just saw that like everything that I had assumed this program was about was wrong. You know, because I had never been to AA, but let me tell you, they're all sheep, they're all lame. I would literally say that stuff. And I mean, what's kind of interesting and like a fond memory I have now is right before I got arrested that last time, I remember having a moment of clarity that I didn't really take action around, but it was like, you know, there's a lot of people sitting in AA meetings and it's for a reason. You know, they got sober for a reason. So maybe I'm not really getting it all. Yeah, so I started to read the book and I saw that I could define my higher power as I saw fit, which was huge because again, I knew everything about AA and it was all about religion and God, and you know, I'm a science major who dropped out of college. But you know, I used science and I used intellect to basically denounce religion and people who were religious. And it was just really arrogant of me, you know, like I know Jay says like we see what we look for and we hear what we listen for, and I was looking at all the reasons to justify why religion was bad or God was terrible, and I was wrong. And I'm really glad that I was wrong, because what's kind of ironic about it is the very things I use to denounce spirituality and God and all those things are what connect me to my higher power today. You know, and it started with that thought in jail of, wow, I claim to be this scientist, this touting person of, you know, science and theory, and I've been approaching this concept of spirituality with such a closed mind, so biased. And you know, that's the exact opposite of what a scientist is supposed to be. Like they're supposed to set aside their biases, they're supposed to be as objective as humanly possible, you know. um So that was a little bit of an awakening for me. And, I always like to tell the story of, just to kind of jump around forward. I'm like 2 years sober and I'm miserable. I've done the steps, but I'm not really working a good program. And I'm certain that there is no God. Um, I'm working for or 40 hours a week. I'm going to school and I'm just like, what is like, there isn't a God. What's the point of life? Blah, blah, blah. And I was in a biology class and I was so like caught up in my narrative. I wasn't even certain like what was happening in the class. But what my professor did is he took a leaf and put it on a slide and put it under a microscope and it projected onto the wall of the classroom. And that caught my attention. And I saw it and was just baffled at how much mystery there is in the world. Because intellectually, I knew what was going to pop up, but I saw, in living color, the like chloroplasts and the cellular wall and this whole little world like existing that's unbeknownst to me. I can't see it, unbeknownst visually. And it just really kind of slapped me in the face in a good way to realize that I can't see everything. I will never know anything or know everything. And, if I could just get out of my own ego and sit back and like bear witness to the magnificence of life, I could have a really nice life. And that's my higher power today. Just this concept of like this energy. I really like chemistry. So like more on a very micro level, all these molecules that I can't see, but that are with me and they're always with me and they co-journey with me. And I'm very grateful because that experience helped me believe in a higher power till this day. There was never a need to go back and kind of play with the idea that there isn't a higher power. So that was my experience. So anyways, I was able to, by the grace of the universe, get out of jail and have one more chance to fix my life. And thankfully, instead of getting high or drunk, I chose the former. I went into a sober living. My sober living ingrained upon me, you go to meetings, you get a sponsor, you work the steps. And that's what I did. My friend from sober living says that I didn't talk for the first year. And I guess that kind of explains like my engagement in the program. I was very quiet and untrusting and fearful. But I got a sponsor and I worked the steps to the best of my ability. And in that included my 4-step that left off some pretty big secrets. And I really felt the pain of not being honest about that as my my life in recovery continued on. New sobriety was really painful. I'm not going to act like it wasn't. Like when I look back at it, I'm so grateful I'm where I'm at now because it really takes a lot to stay sober and learn how to stay sober. I mean, I feel like there were times when I just wake up and I wanted to go back to bed. Like I woke up and I literally could not wait to come back and get back in my bed. But I did the steps and I did have a spiritual experience that started in jail and continued with my steps. One of those spiritual experiences included a really important amends that, from day one of sobriety, like I really wanted to make. I think it's so funny because I feel like a lot of the people I come into contact are just so eager to make those amends, and I can so relate to that. And this amends was to a very close childhood friend. We had grown up like singing the Beach Boys, taking like cringy home videos, all the things. And, as I started to kind of go down a darker path, she stayed on a much more appropriate path, so to speak, if that's the right word to explain that. But she built a really beautiful life for herself. She was working with special needs children, very involved in sports and nonprofits. And the issue was that I remembered her information and I remembered her address. So, obviously, like I had said, I'd have warrants. I didn't care. And I learned that if I used her information, then the cop would be like, "Oh, you're clean. You're a perfect human. Goodbye." And just that's how I would kind of escape the fact that I had open warrants. And it was really awful what I did. And one time I was so out of my mind that I still got arrested under her name. And it really negatively impacted her life, because she was working with special needs. Her job immediately was notified that she had been charged with this. When she went to apply for new jobs, she'd have to show like her future employer a letter from the judge saying that this was not me. And it was horrible what I did. And I was very eager to make that amends, to show her how terrible I felt, which was very about me. But thankfully, the pacing of it all, it took till I was about 2 years sober to make that amends. And I sat across from her at a coffee shop and said my amends. And this is when she told me all the things that happened as a result of my behavior. And then she shared her experience about her older brother, who I also knew, who struggled with alcoholism. And, she used her experience with him to explain how she learned compassion and forgiveness. And so, the amends process is all about just taking responsibility for my behavior and making a firm commitment to never repeat that action again. Blah, blah, blah. Is there anything that I've missed? What would you like me to do? So it wasn't about forgiveness, but she forgave me. And I literally could not comprehend why. Like, I was like, no, like, I'm a terrible person. Like, how are you forgiving me? And, she used the experience of her brother and how she had to learn how to forgive in order to be free of that. And it was amazing, and also really hard for me to comprehend at the time. And so that was such a powerful experience. It was so hard, and I'm grateful it happened at 2 years, because there were a lot of feelings, understandably, but I'm so grateful she allowed me the opportunity to make that amends. And I went to the courts and I resolved it on that end, but she didn't have to hear it, and I'm really grateful that she did. And now we like say happy birthday to each other. It's really nice. So as I mentioned, in like year 2, it got really dicey. That secret was popping up. I didn't know how to tell somebody, because I had just learned, like, you keep your secrets to yourself. And I was really depressed. And I remember, like, I saw my therapist, and it was right before the holidays. I saw my therapist, and I like just made a little peep about it, like what we call, I'm a therapist now, we call it like a door handle confession. Like, the session's over, you're about to leave out the door, and you're like, by the way, and just say this like really powerful thing you probably should have started the session with. And I did that. And he was leaving for 2 weeks, so he was like, let's pick this back up when you come back. He was like, are you going to a meeting tonight? Because he was in recovery. And I was like, actually, my home group, the place is being used as like a voter registration or like a voting poll location, so no. And he encouraged me, obviously, to go to a meeting. So I was at my home, and I pondered if I should go to a meeting. I was like, I'm not going. I'm just going to lie in bed. And last minute, like, something told me to go. So I went up the street to a church where they had meetings all the time. And it was called, I think the meeting was called like Lack of Power. And, I had my hoodie on, 2 years sober, had my hoodie on, sat all the way in the back. Do not talk to me. It was just like a really vision for you, you know. And somebody spoke, and this man spoke about all of these things that I couldn't even comprehend sharing on a group level. You know, I related to secrets that he shared about immense grief that he went through and how he stayed sober for everything. And I literally rolled my eyes and was like, are you serious? Like talking to my higher power? Like, okay, funny. I like it just seemed like so much greater than I could comprehend. And, you know, that was the beginning of it. And then they had sharing. I wasn't going to share. I did not share. But all these people, men and women, got up to the podium and they talked about abuse. They talked about grief. They talked about all these things that I was just so certain I would take to my grave. And it really felt like a spiritual experience. And that man was Jay. So, you know, when I heard him speak, I was like, I want what that man has, you know. And so what I did in true Calista fashion was thanked him really quick and left. um, but you know, by the grace of my higher power, that meeting also recorded and it was posted on their website, and he was the only person who had his last name. So then I found him on Facebook, and the rest is history. And I really, I'm just not even the same person that I once was. And I understand that you have to do what it takes, work the program, work the steps, all these things for that to come to fruition. But I could not have done it without AA and without Jay, who has really shown up for me in ways that none of my family members were able to. And I think that's what's so beautiful about this program is like, we do get to create our own family. And you know, I was always looking for people to replace the people I had lost. Like, I wanted a new mom, you know, I wanted whatever. And I don't have that feeling anymore. Like, I am complete and I'm surrounded by people that I care about and I love, and I know that they love me, and that we all have each other's best interest in our heart. I made an amends to an old high school friend, and I remember when I was making it, I just had the epiphany, like, wow, I never knew how to be a friend. I never knew what friendship was until I got sober, because it was all about like, can you drink tonight? You know, blah, 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 blah. Like, my issues with alcohol was the core, like, it was the core of any like part that I related with others or hung out with them. You understand. And now I know true friendship. I know what it means to show up for others, even when it's an inconvenience, or to say what you're going to do. And it's because people in this program role modeled that for me. You know, sponsorship. I sponsor a woman. She actually just called me right now. And she is so sweet. And I've known her for it's 4 years. And you know, she had the experience where she was young like me. She's actually 23, and she felt like she needed to do more research. And you know, I just reiterated what we learned in the book. You know, if by all means, if you aren't an alcoholic, like, who am I to say you are? And if you have to do that, then no one's holding you here. And so that's what she did. And you know, I remember my friend had actually asked how she was doing like a year later, and I was like, that's a great like question. I'll check in with her. She actually texted me that day and was really in a bad spot, really struggling. I had the opportunity to take her back to treatment. And what's really interesting is she has the same sobriety date as she did prior, just a year ahead. And now she's a mother of two and has multiple years sober. And the gift of sponsorship, like, I couldn't even have imagined how meaningful it is. Because I can be very like me. surprise, alcoholism. But the opportunity to show up for somebody and to see them work the steps and to see their life completely change, you know, like I had never considered having kids, and seeing how she grew up as a woman into this beautiful mom, like it made me learn so much and really see the beauty in that process. And I love sober moms. I've come to learn I really love sober moms. Probably because my own experience, but I'm my own time. Okay. So today this is what my life looks like. I've worked the steps multiple times. I've worked the traditions multiple times. I call Jay almost every day. I do all the things that I mentioned prior. And I have this really big, beautiful life. And it's so important for me to never forget that, because it's so easy to forget that. I get all the things, right? Like I get some of my family back that's still around. And it's almost like that part of my life is a movie or like some faint dream, because it's just, this program has shaped me into a person I never could have imagined. And I'm surrounded by people I never could have imagined would want to be in my company. I just graduated from a master's program to become a therapist, as I mentioned. I was honored to be inspired by Jay to do my practicum in hospice, which was an incredible experience. And it was just another layer to my firm belief that there is something greater than myself, and that I literally don't know what's going on. Like there's just so much, you know, when someone passes, which I've been in the room for, there's just this sense of like brightness that you can't see, and like energy filling the room. Like I can't even describe it, but it just, there's just so much to this world that I don't know and I can't see. And now I work with the population like us, and it's truly a gift. And I I I know I've said this periodically over and over again, but I really never could have imagined what this would entail. I just came back from Italy for a month. Jay, are you gonna say something? I saw him on mute.
10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I just came back from Italy for a month, which is crazy. And I don't say that to boast, but just for the experience I had, which is like, you know, big wine culture, a lot of drinking. I ended the trip with a wedding. That was our excuse to go over there, myself and my boyfriend. And like our friends who hosted the wedding, like the groom has a wine company. You know, it's just like I was surrounded by an environment that in the past I would have wrecked the wedding. I would have made such an embarrassment out of myself. Like, and that was the thought that I kept thinking throughout the whole process, you know, like, wow, if I wasn't sober, I mean, I wouldn't be there. But I would have ruined this amazing, like beautiful night for our friends. You know, and I even danced, which I never do. But you know, I'm like, I mean, after working in hospice and being sober so long, I'm like, literally, whatever. Who cares? Like, we only have so much time on this planet. Yeah, and I didn't need a drink. I just had my Diet Coke. But my life is really beautiful today. I'm in a relationship, a long-term relationship with a man that I didn't think existed, because men were awful. No offense to men. I was wrong, obviously. But you know, the worldview I had was so critical and so jaded by my own experience that I just left a really negative imprint on the world. And because what I've learned in AA, and the experiences I've had both in AA and with outside help, I'm so grateful to be a different person that can show up to the best of my ability and hopefully make a positive impact. I always like to end on this topic of forgiveness. You know, I mentioned with my friend, when she forgave me, I literally could not comprehend what she was doing, because I felt like I didn't deserve it. And I also just didn't understand how she could be such an amazing human. And then I did some work, some grief work, and I learned what forgiveness was about truly. You know, the definition, if you look it up in the dictionary, which I've never done, it means to let go of resentment. It's not about giving the other person anything. And being an alcoholic, I know resentment very well. I was very angry at my parents, even into my recovery, um, for all the things I had mentioned. And I remember I was like sitting in the redwoods, which is beautiful, around a campfire, really struggling with the relationship with my mom because she had already died, and there was a lot there. And I remember I just had this moment of clarity where I saw her for just another human being. I just saw her as another alcoholic, who didn't make it into the rooms of AA, like didn't have the opportunity to have this beautiful life that I have been granted, or gifted. And in that moment, like my heart just broke, like this mutual suffering that we had shared with alcoholism, and just the pain I felt because she was not able to show up for me in the way she wanted. She always told me she wanted a daughter. And it just like, it gives me goosebumps now because she must have hated herself more than I ever hated her for not being able to be the mom that she wanted to be. And I know what it's like to not be the person that you wanted to be because of this disease. Um, and it doesn't excuse or condone anything she did, but it allowed me to just let go of that. And I feel closer to her now than I did when she was alive. And, I don't know what your recovery will look like, but those are those like full circle, beautiful moments that we get, and everyone's looks different. But, every time I see a hummingbird, I think of her. The night she died, a hummingbird came to me in my dream and said that it was her, and she said I was okay. So, I get to be connected to her in that way. And that doesn't mean I'm not sad and I don't grieve her loss, but that was really powerful. That's why I love sober moms. My dad was so like unwell. Obviously like the sexual abuse, and also just like the way he moved through his life. He was really unwell and he was a really sick person. And I don't mean that in like a negative judgment, just an evaluation. And I learned how to forgive him because I didn't condone or excuse his behavior. I didn't welcome him back into my life by forgiving him. He didn't even know I forgave him. But thank you. But I had gone through my life not only using that experience and my relationship with him to condone or excuse my poor behavior and my drinking, but I carried this 1,000-pound resentment through my sobriety. It was making me miserable. And every time I would like engage with a man, like I would think of it. And, there would just be continuous quote unquote triggers. Not a huge fan of that word, but like continuous things that reminded me of this huge resentment I was carrying, and how I was a victim. And through forgiving, I was able to let go of that resentment, to let go of that burden and be fully present. Because in my experience, when I'm carrying around resentments like that, I'm not able to be present. I'm constantly looking back in the past. And it it doesn't excuse what he did, but in forgiving him, not but, and in forgiving him, I was able to have empathy for his life, like his experience. Like to be that unwell is awful. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. And not all victims are perpetrators, but most perpetrators are victims. And so to imagine that that had been done to him breaks my heart. And he died, it'll be 2 years in November. And because of this program, because of the healing that this program guided me on, and the people who walked before me, I was able to grieve in sobriety and really be present with those feelings, and also know that like I was complete with that relationship. And it's all because of this program. Anything I do is because of what I learned here. I'm forever indebted to Jay. Thank you for being so much of what I needed in life, as a healthy role model, and the women in this program. Everyone in AA made it safe for me to truly be myself and be honest. And for that, I'm really grateful. So thank you so much. Hope you have a good night.
Yay. Oh my God. Thank you so much, Calista. Let me stop this.